Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 282 for the 4th of Elul and a leap year. So there is this GIF that was going around the internet, one of those little movie thingies that loops, like a picture that kind of loops over and over and over again. And it was going around a little while back of a subway car that was going really, really fast and moving in a certain direction. But then the interesting thing about this GIF was that if you looked at this image for long enough, and especially if you looked at it in a certain way, you could actually see the subway car moving in the opposite direction from what you first saw. So it's really wild. And I'm going to try to post this GIF in the show notes if I can, to give you guys really a nice visual for this idea of how cool it is that just with the power of perception, you could actually shift the direction that the subway car is moving. There are other examples of these kinds of optical illusions, of course. There's the one where there's like a woman that's like spinning around on one foot, and it's a similar idea. It's like, is she spinning to the right or is she spinning to the left? And people will say different things. And again, if you look at it long enough and you look at it with the right perspective, you can kind of control which way she is moving. We also know that there's this idea of those 3D images, right? That it's like you look at the image and at first it just looks like a big mishmash of colors and chaos and things like that. But again, if you look at it for long enough, or if you look at it from the right perspective, you can actually see an image pop out at you, a 3D image. So all of this is actually a very tangible way to help us understand something that we're going to be learning about today, which is that this shift of perspective, not only is it possible, but it's actually essential, and it is actually, in a certain sense, the very point of our lives. What do I mean by this? So we live in a world, right? And in our lives, we experience a lot of things. Some things are pleasant, some things not so much. We experience a lot of joy when good things happen to us. And I'm going to say, quote unquote, good things happen to us. Like it's our birthday and people bring us a lot of presents, things like that. And then we experience suffering sometimes when, quote unquote, bad things happen to us. When, somebody makes us angry, we lose a friend, whatever it is, different things. Everybody has their different experiences with this. But what we're going to be really focusing on today, and this is something that we've learned and focused on a lot in Tanya, throughout the Tanya, is that ultimately, when you get down deep enough into it, really everything is good. Because everything comes from God, and God is the essence of goodness. God, as we've been saying, is the purveyor of chesed, his most essential attribute, the primordial attribute from which all other experiences that we have of him come from, is chesed, is this loving, giving kindness. So true, this kindness can come about in different vestments. Sometimes it can appear more direct to us, and sometimes not so direct. We've used an analogy before of let's say if you have a parent who is disciplining their child, but it's always coming out of love. So it's sometimes it might seem more overtly out of love, like when she goes up to her child and she gives him a hug and a kiss and all of that kind of thing. But then there are times when it might not appear superficially as love, but it really is. When she tells him he has to go to sleep, when she says you must brush your teeth and he's kicking and screaming, and he really doesn't want to go to sleep, or stop eating that candy, or whatever it is. This is also coming from a loving place, even though to the child, it doesn't necessarily appear as such. Or somebody who didn't really know about parenting, if they just saw this image from afar of a parent scolding their child and the child's crying, they might think this is a really horrible parent. But when you know the deeper meaning, what's really going on, you actually see this is coming from love. So this is the same idea with God and his relationship with us. Truly, if we get down deep enough into it, we recognize the fact that God is truly, truly doing good. And this isn't just like a nice, like a nicety thing that we say, like like just make ourselves feel better. It truly is the case. It truly is the case that God is doing good, and everything that we experience in our lives is truly good. It's not just for the sake of good, that it's like, okay, we have to go through this suffering in order to come to a better place. It's for our growth and things like that. That's like that idea of this is for the sake of good. Rather, it is good. And the only issue is that we don't always perceive it as such. However, just like these gifts and just like those 3D images, we can shift our perspective. And if we shift our perspective enough and in the right way, we can actually see that it truly is good. And not only is this something that we can do, but as we'll learn in today's Tanya, this is actually something that's incumbent upon us, that truly is the reason why we're brought down into the world, is to be able to do that. And not only that, to bring the point home even further, if we don't do this, if we refuse to try to see beyond the image, the superficial image that we see in front of us, and if we instead choose to just assume, to just declare that no, it isn't good, it's bad, it's just bad as it is, we'll see that this is actually equivalent to idolatry, because this is ultimately a total and utter denial of God's goodness. So we don't want to do this, obviously. We don't want to be idolaters. So we really want to try to be better at shifting our perspective on goodness. And as we'll learn, just like with these different examples, like when you look at the lady who's dancing to the right or to the left, or the subway car or the 3D image, when you shift your perspective in a conscious and controlled way, then it actually appears the way that you shifted your perspective in a real way. It becomes manifest. You don't have to try as hard anymore. And the same thing works with us, is that once we uncover the layers, once we uncover the shadow of the perceived bad, because that's all it is, it's just perceived bad, it's not actual bad, then the good becomes apparent. And then we can actually see that truly everything is chesed. Everything is God's goodness. Truly, this level of perception won't be totally full, won't be totally true until the times of Mashiach, but we can hasten that. First of all, we can get a glimpse of that now, and we can get a sense of that now through our shift in perspective. And that really is the way that we can hasten that ultimate global sense of awareness of God. That's sort of like, I think, what the Rebbe meant when he said, open your eyes, Mashiach is here. What does that mean, to open your eyes? It means shift your perspective, look around you, see what's really here, see the truth of reality. And the more we do that on an individual level, then that can translate into a collective level. And then we really will be living in a world in which godliness and truth and goodness is revealed in a true and real way that we don't have to work as hard to see. So that is a kind of summary of what we're going to be learning about today. And for context, we are still in Iggeres HaKodesh, and we're going to be beginning a new epistle, Epistle 12. And so here, interestingly, with this epistle, just a little note on this, is that as you may have noticed, a lot of these epistles or all of these epistles, in fact, are letters that the Alter Rebbe wrote to his Chassidim, and they're written in very endearing fashion. And they're written in this kind of collective sense, like to his dear Chassidim, my dear followers, my dear brethren, all of that. The interesting thing about this one is that the Alter Rebbe begins this one actually addressing the singular. Instead of saying like my dear brethren and that kind of thing, is the way he begins it is as if he's talking to one person. He starts off with a phrase where he says laskilcha bina, to enlighten you with understanding. And this you, in Hebrew there's a you that's plural and there's a you that's singular. And in this case, the Alter Rebbe actually uses the singular, laskilcha, instead of laskilchem would be the plural. So why? Why is this? So the understanding of this is that really it's because the Alter Rebbe is talking on a very personal level here. And it's something that it's not just like a collective thing that we should all work on. What he's going to be teaching us in this epistle is something that is very individualistic and can be attained by every single individual on a very personal level. So what is it that the Alter Rebbe is going to be enlightening us with his understanding? So first, he starts off with the negative, what we shouldn't do. He says that this is not the way to have the light of God dwell within a person. What is not the way? To crave and desire physical, the life of the flesh and children and sustenance. So that's pretty intense, right? Way to start off. So basically, the Alter was saying you should not live your life desiring a family and desiring parnasa. That's not what your life goals should be about. Which seems really like shocking, right? Like you would think, like to the outside world, what could be a better goal than trying to raise a family, trying to make an honest living, all that stuff, right? So the Alter is going to explain this. So he says that that we can understand this through looking at a teaching of the sages that comes from Pirkei Avos, chapter 2, verse 4, where it says, "Batel retzoncha chule." So nullify your will for the sake of his will. So what does this mean? This means that your will should truly be nullified in its source, and you shouldn't have any type of desire at all for anything in this physical world, which includes children, life, and sustenance, bnei chaya mezoneh in Hebrew, which like we can translate in a more general sense that bnei, children, is like family, life is like health, and sustenance is really making a living, having a parnasa. So the Alter Rebbe says that really our life, we're not here. This is something he's told us before. We're not here for physicality. That's not why we're here. And these desires that we have, we really ultimately want to get to a state where we actually nullify all of our desires for anything physical, including even these kind of things of health and wealth and having a family. So rather we should live in such a state of, and this is from Pirkei Avos also, chapter 4, verse 22, al kachacha tachai. There's a principle which means it is against your will that you are alive. So it's when we really, like we think we've talked about this in Tanya previously, that to us, and consciously, we feel like we love life. We love our lives. We do anything to stay alive. We enjoy everything in life so much, eating, drinking, relationships, all that kind of stuff. But the truth is, in true essence, there's this idea that really we didn't come here because we wanted to. It's not like there are some philosophies and religions that think that we all chose to come down into this world. Judaism doesn't believe that. Judaism believes that we actually did not want to be born. Hashem forced us to be born for certain purposes. Yes, they're very lofty purposes. It's ultimately for the good of us, for our good, but we're not here for our will. So actually the deepest part of us doesn't actually want to be here. But nevertheless, it's like now that we are here, it's very hard to shift that perspective. Again, like that 3D image that we're trying to see of like, I don't really want this physical stuff as much as I think I do. It's like, how do you get to that? How do you shift your perspective in that way? And so the Alter Rebbe says, he says the way to clarify this is the only way to gain this clarification in this way is through having a true faith in the Yotzer Bereshit, in God, essentially. Yotzer Bereshit is the one who formed the beginning. So meaning, Kabbalistically, we could say the Yotzer Reshit is Chochmah, so meaning that Hashem created everything from Chochmah, and meaning that this is, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain this. He says that this is that we see that the world was created something from nothing. Reshit Chochmah, so the beginning of Chochmah. So meaning Chochmah is kind of like this nothingness, this like it's like a bridge between the nothing and the something. That's where the world comes from. Is this like half something, half nothing? This koach ma, and so the world is created something from nothing all the time. This is a Chochmah that is not understood to any creation. And this creation occurs, this like something from nothing creation occurs from moment to moment, every single moment, from Hashem's Chochmah, from Hashem's blessed Chochmah that vitalizes everything. And so when a person really deepens their thought and contemplates this and meditates upon this idea and really forms a picture in their minds about the facts that we are coming into being from nothing at every moment, really, truly at every moment, then how can you ever imagine that something bad is happening to you? Because there's no suffering in relation to children or life or sustenance or any other suffering in the world. Okay, so why? So why is it, so let's just take a pause here. So why is it that this meditation that the Alter Rebbe is suggesting, he says, how do you get to this place of like not having your whole focus be on having like the optimal family and parnasa and have the end and health and like have that be your whole orientation in life? How do you do that? He says through engaging in this meditation where you recognize that everything comes from this ayin, everything comes from this chokhmah of Hashem. And so why does this help in this matter of leading your orientation to where it needs to be? Because when you recognize that this ayin, this nothingness which you come from, which is coming about, something from nothing at every moment, all the time, which is Hashem's chokhmah. This is the source of your life, and this is the source of goodness and the source of pleasure. And this is what's called Eden, like Gan Eden, like the Garden of Eden, which is above Olam Haba, above the next world. So it's coming from it's like total pleasure is this place. So meaning to say that like when people, like why is it that people put all their orientation towards family or sustenance or health? It's because there's a conception of a possible negative, a possible lack in that area, right? Like people don't really think about their health unless they're like not feeling good, God forbid, right? Or people don't really think about family so much like in so far, or at least not in terms of like craving a family or craving relationships unless they don't have it in some way, unless there's like some level of like suffering in that area. And so, however, what the Alter Rebbe is saying here is he's saying that when you recognize that really the source of your life, the source of everything really comes from God and really comes from this place of Hashem's chokhmah, which is the ultimate pleasure and the ultimate goodness, then there can be no bad. So it's because really ultimately the source of everything is good. The only thing is, the Alter Rebbe does acknowledge that he says this is not something that is understandable. So thus we do recognize that there is bad or suffering in the world. So to give like very practical examples with this, let's say b'nei in the concept in the realm of family. In the realm of family, people might feel like maybe they're not married yet, you know, or maybe they are married and they can't have a child, or maybe they are married and they're having conflicts at home. They're fighting with their spouse. It's not what they thought marriage would be like. There can be it can feel very tumultuous, very, very sad, very intense, right? It could also be when it comes to chai, parnasa. How difficult can it feel sometimes to make a parnasa? It can feel very exhausting, and it can feel sometimes like, you know, things aren't working out for you, and people can get very frustrated in this realm. And then so too with health, God forbid, you know, people all the time, people are suffering, even minor things, they have a headache or whatever, or sometimes real health scares, God forbid. These are things that are true and part of life. It's a part of life that we experience these kind of things. But the Alter Rebbe is reminding us that yes, this is our experience, that we have this experience of suffering, but this is not the true reality. There's the happenings of what's happening, and then there's the meaning that we place on it. We place a meaning that it's bad, it's negative, we're suffering. The true truth is that it's ultimately really good. And it's true. We don't perceive it as totally good. And this is not something the Alter Rebbe wants to minimize. He says this is true. We see it as suffering, but it's not. So it's sort of like we want to recognize that, just like, again, if you're looking at that GIF of the subway car moving in one direction, let's say you're looking at it with your friends and you see it moving to the right and your friend sees it moving to the left. It's like it can feel very frustrating because it's like you clearly see it moving to the right. Your friend's like, no, it's really moving to the left. A better example of this might be even if you guys remember that thing with the color of the dress. Like, do you see there was a picture of this dress going around the internet, those of you who like follow the social media and stuff, of like, is the dress blue or blue and black, or is it gold and white? And it was really fascinating to see that people really saw the same dress as being two totally different colors. Now, the interesting thing about that example is that there was an objective answer. It turns out, believe it or not, that dress was actually blue and black. It was not gold and white. A lot of people did perceive it as gold and white, and that is true. Their perception really told them that, but that wasn't the objective reality. It's somehow, because of the lighting or whatever, it gave this like illusion to make it appear that it was like kind of gold and white, but the truth is it was actually blue and black. But just imagine there is a frustration. Let's say you were one of those people who sees it, who saw the dress as gold and white, and you're sitting there and you're like, I know it's black and blue. My logic tells me it's black and blue, but I don't see it as such. So both of those things are going on at the same time. That's sort of our lives, is the Alter Rebbe is saying there needs to be this acknowledgement. So yes, on the one hand, we don't see reality for what it is. We experience suffering, and it's real, and it's hard. Life is difficult. On the other hand, we need to recognize that this is not true truth. True truth is not that it's bad. It's not a bad thing. We might be feeling pain. It might be difficult, but it's not objectively a bad thing that's happening. Because truly, says the Alter Rebbe, there is no bad that comes down from above. Everything is good. The only thing that Hashem brings down into the world is good. It's just that it's not understood because it's so great, because it's so tremendous, you know, like just like it's like that 3D image. We can't see the 3D image on first glance because our eyes wouldn't be able to process it. It's like there's too much going on. There's too much intricate detail. So it's too much for us. So it's not because it's bad. It's because God is actually so high and so lofty that the good is not being translated to us. And this is another principle. The Alter Rebbe doesn't really get into it here so much, though he does address it elsewhere, that in fact, not only is it also good, like when we experience negative things, is it also good? On a certain level, it's actually even a greater good, because it's like sometimes a good that is so great that we wouldn't be able to perceive it and to handle it because of the greatness that it is. So it needs to be enclosed actually in this concealed manner, right? We can understand this again if we look at a parent. It's like when the parent hugs the child, is that an expression of love? Sure, that's an expression of love. But you can argue in a certain sense that in a certain way, the mother's love is actually more greater and stronger when she's disciplining the child, because she's actually teaching him lessons and training him for the future so that he will have like a good life and have be the best that he can be. Of course, not to minimize hugging. Hugging is very important and very good, but there is something to be said about sometimes the chesed that's included in Gevura is kind of a bigger, greater level of chesed, and that's why it needs to be enclosed in Gevura. This is a spiritual concept. But now back to the text. So the Alter Rebbe says this whole idea of like kind of having this thing in your mind. Yes, you're experiencing suffering. Yes, life is hard, but recognizing that truly in true truth, even if you don't see it, it's truly good and everything is good. The Alter Rebbe says that this is actually the mainstay, the essence of faith, of emunah, for which man was created. So we are actually here in order to look past this 3D image, in order to see the image within the chaos, and to actually really believe that there is no place that is devoid of him. And the Alter Rebbe brings a citation here from Mishlei. This is from chapter 16, verse 15, where it says, Ve'ol pnei melech hayim. In the light of the king's countenance, there is life. So the deeper meaning behind this citation is actually interesting. Is that there's this idea that if a person is sentenced to, if let's say somebody was living under the reignship of a king, and then let's say for whatever reason they were sentenced to death, if this person were to come face to face with the king, then their sentence there's a chance that the sentence would be commuted, and the king would see him and kind of have mercy on him, and he wouldn't be sentenced to death anymore. So the same holds true in our case, that basically it's like when we look the king in the eye, when we see God, when we see truth for what it is, then we can live, then we can have a true life. We won't suffer anymore. And in this manner, then the Alter Rebbe brings another citation, this time from Divrei Yamim, chapter 16, verse 27, where it says, Oz v'chedva bimkomo, strength and gladness are in his place. So there's this recognition that really, once we recognize God, what is God? God is strength and gladness and goodness. And because God is really just good all day long, there's only goodness. And thus the first thing that a person must do is a person needs to be happy and to be joyous at every moment, and to really live with this faith in God that vivifies him and that does good to him at every moment. And so now the Alter Rebbe is going to give a contrasting example of all of this. Let's say you have a person, or maybe God forbid you are this person, who does not see the good, does not try to see the truth of what's going on and all of that, but instead is sad and instead complains. What does this show? If you see somebody who's very sad and depressed and complaining all the time, you look at this person and you're like, oh wow, Nebuch, they must be going through a really hard time. They must be really suffering, right? And they're missing some kind of goodness in their life. But this type of person who is living with this mentality, who's sitting there and is like, oh, woe is me, I'm missing something in my life and I'm suffering so much. The Alter Rebbe says that this is, God forbid, like a heretic. So it's really intense. It's not just a nice thing to do to see the goodness in the world and in your life. If you don't do this, says the Alter Rebbe, you're actually like a heretic. And this is why the Chochmei Emet, the Kabbalists, is what is called in Hebrew the Chochmei Emet, the sages of truth is a literal translation. They went very far away from the attribute of sadness. The Kabbalists really worked hard not to ever be sad. Because really, somebody who really is truly faithful will not ever get like perturbed by any suffering that they experience in the world. So this might sound very stoic to those of you that are familiar with Stoic philosophy. I actually happen to be rereading a book right now by Ryan Holiday that's based on Stoic philosophy called The Obstacle's the Way. Maybe I'll get into that more at another time. But there is something, obviously Stoicism, Judaism is not the same thing, and there's a lot of differences and things like that. But there is something to be said about having this like Stoic way about a person, which what does that mean? It means like sort of not being overtaken by emotions, by negative emotions in particular, that things happen to you in the world. And it's like, yes, some things might seem pleasant, some things might seem not so pleasant. So according to the Stoics, you should not let anything perturb you, because really there's what you're experiencing, and then there's the meaning that you impose on what you're experiencing, and that meaning is very subjective, and that you can shift the meaning of what it is, and you can make that meaning be whatever you want that meaning to be, and there's no inherent meaning in what you're experiencing. In Judaism and Tanya, we take it to the next level, and we say, actually, no, there is meaning in what you're experiencing. It just might not be the meaning that you perceive right now, and truly the meaning is a positive meaning. Truly the meaning is a good meaning. And so either way, it's like when you recognize that what you're experiencing, maybe it might seem negative in the moment, it might seem like suffering, but it's actually not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. It's a very good thing. And when you have this faith, when you have this recognition of God, you won't be perturbed by anything that happens to you in the world. You'll be more even-keeled in your life. And so in that case, the Alter Rebbe goes on and he says that then everything that happens to you in the world, whether it's something yes or no, it will be equal to you equally. You get the promotion, you don't get the promotion. It doesn't matter to you so much. The shidduch worked out, it didn't work out. You're not going to be frazzled by these things. You'll be more with living with this like kind of even keel coolness about you, because and those people who do not have this equality, this equilibrium in them, says the Alter Rebbe, this is very intense. So the Alter Rebbe says that actually somebody who doesn't have this equilibrium is showing that they're part of the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav is these people who are not really Jewish. These were like the part of the Jewish people that left Egypt, that were called the mixed multitude. They weren't quite on board with the Jewish people. They were sort of kind of mixed negativity within them. So that's what a person is like. That's what the Alter Rebbe is liking such a person to, who does not live with this even-keeled way. So it's pretty intense, right? And what is it about the Erev Rav? How do we define them? We say that they are the type of people that act for themselves. Legar mehu avdin. That it shows that they're just in it for themselves. They're just here for like their goodness. Like, did I get the job I wanted? Are these results coming out the way I want them to be? This is a very self-centered way of living. And one who loves themselves so much, this is a way then that they're leaving the hand of God, and they're living actually a very goyish life, the way Chayei Goyim, says the Alter Rebbe. This is a non-Jewish way to live. So the non-Jewish way to live is to live in this more like self-oriented way of what's good for me and everything, and what you see is what you get kind of thing. But and it's all coming from a place of self-love. And so this is why, so such a person who has this like self-love, this is why all they're going to be concerned with is the life of the flesh. They'll be concerned with their family and with their sustenance and their livelihood, because all of this is good for him. So again, so this might sound really harsh. This might sound really intense. Like it might sound like, what could be more lofty? Isn't it a lofty goal to want to have a family, to want to make a living, to want to be healthy? All these things sound like very nice things, but the Alter Rebbe basically is bringing the point home that if it's just for their own sake, that's not lofty at all. You're just being selfish. If you just want a family to make you feel good, to make you feel fulfilled, if you want to make money so that you can buy all those luxuries that you really like, if you want to be healthy just because like it feels good for you and it makes you feel good, this is not the right orientation. Yes, we want to strive and have all of these things, but it ultimately should be for the sake of serving God. There always needs to be that higher purpose there. And the Alter Rebbe says, again, very harshly, somebody who does not live with this godly mindset, somebody who's really just oriented towards the life of the flesh, the Alter Rebbe says it would have been better if he had not been created. Wow. So why? Because the whole point of the creation of a person in this world is to be tested with these kind of tests and to actually ascertain what it is in his heart and to not be strayed after other gods. So all of this is a test. When these things come up in our lives, when we experience these suffering, these things that seem negative, these challenges, it's actually there. The whole point is for us to overcome it. Hashem set up the world as this kind of like 3D image thing, and he wants us to see the image. He wants us to see it. And if we're not doing that, why are we here? What's the point of our lives? Because this actually is the point of our life, is to be able to see that. And to not be strayed after these false gods, quote unquote, the Elokim Acherim. What are these false gods? Like the Alter Rebbe says, he says, these are the desires of the body that come from the Sitra Achra, and these are the things that a person likes. So if a person's whole life is just about pleasure and feeling good in a physical sense, then this is very idolatrous. So when we were brought down into this world, we were actually, this is the whole point, is to give us this test. Which way are we going to go? Are we going to go in this level of the other gods, of going after physical desires and things like that? Or are we going to seek after true life, true godliness? So this brings me back. This makes me think about that other episode we had about addiction, with that experiment with the rats. If you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen to it. I think if I do say so myself, I think it's one of the more interesting episodes that I've talked about this experiment with the rats, where they were pressing on this lever to experience these dopamine hits. And it was really interesting to see that these rats would actually forego food and even engage in a lot of suffering just to get those hits of dopamine. And I liken this to choices that we face on a daily basis in our lives as to where we're going to get our nourishment from. Are we going to get our nourishment directly from God by engaging in wholesome godly activities? Or are we just seeking that next dopamine hit, that next dopamine high, whether it's through social media, through any vice that we have that could be just like this immediate hit of immediate instant gratification, but ultimately not nourishing for us in the long run. We can also think about it in terms of what we spoke about again in a previous episode about the tourist trap, that it's like you go on vacation and there's tourist traps everywhere. When you play those like little carnival games, they're all rigged. You don't want to waste your money. The slot machines, whatever they are, it's like you're literally throwing your money away, but it feels good at the time. It feels so alluring. The lights are so shiny. The music is so loud and inviting and all of that stuff. So that's the point that Alter Rebbe is bringing home here, is he's saying that we have a choice here in this world. Are we going to fall into the tourist trap of the world, which is the desires of the flesh and just going after these things and being slaves to our impulses, being slaves to our feelings of suffering and what we see superficially in front of our eyes? Or are we going to work a little harder to see beyond the mask, to see beyond what's in front of us and try to see the truth, to try to see the goodness, the godliness within everything? So making this choice to see the goodness, to see the godliness, to really have your will and desire be for true truth, which is the God of life, the living God, then this in order to get to this level, you must really truly believe with true faith that he really lives it. Meaning that it's not just like some idea like, oh, sure, I believe in God, but like I also have my life. It's like, no, all of your needs, everything in your life, all come from this truth in all of their details, which are not from the Sitra Achra, not from the other side, but rather from Hashem. As it says in Tehillim in this regard, so this is from Tehillim chapter 37, verse 23, Hashem itzadei gever konanu, meaning that the steps of man are set out by God. So meaning that like every step in our lives, where we live, what we do, the jobs that we have, the work that we have, all of this comes from God. And it means living with this recognition of this. And the Alter Rebbe brings another citation from Tehillim again. This is from Tehillim chapter 139, verse 4, where it says, Ki en milah v'shonehen Hashem yadata chula. For there is no word on my tongue. Behold, God, you know it all. So again, this idea that God knows everything. There's nothing devoid or separate from God. And thus, everything is truly good, truly in truth, just that it's not understood to us. And with truly having this faith, in truth, then everything becomes, this is the amazing thing, everything becomes actually good in a revealed sense. So our perception can change revealed reality. When we choose to see that subway car moving in one direction, actually it becomes apparent. It's true, and it becomes true in true reality. And so this is the same thing here. When we choose and to shift our mindset and to see the true truth and goodness of the world, we actually see it as good, such that through this faith, when a person really truly believes that this negativity, this bad, that seems like this is what's apparent, like something looks negative, something looks really bad. When a person recognizes that the whole vitality of this quote unquote negativity actually comes from the supernal goodness, which is which is Hashem's chokhmah, which is beyond our understanding, which is this Eden, this Gan Eden, this ultimate like pleasure place that's above the world to come. So it's coming from a very, very high place. Then through this faith, like from this faith, then the negativity, the what seems to be the seemingly negative becomes encompassed and becomes elevated, truly elevated in this supernal goodness, the supernal concealed goodness. So that's the end of the section. And so just to kind of sum it all up, so the basic idea is that the power of perception is really real. The shift in perspective is really real. And not only is it real, it's essential, and it's called upon us to do this. And we actually have the power through our perception to shift reality in a revealed sense. And so things that we experience in our lives that might seem negative and suffering that we experience, it's really just our perspective. There is nothing negative in the world because everything comes from God's goodness. And so thus we need to shift our orientation, and we need to shift our orientation away from the immediate, what we see in front of us, like, this person lost their job. They're in a fight with their family, whatever it is, that's the immediate, what you see in front of you. And you need to widen your scope. You need to widen your glance and recognize that while what you see in front of you seems negative, seems bad, and that shouldn't be your focus. Your focus should not be on these petty details of life. They might not seem so petty. Your life, your family, your health, these things might not seem petty at all. They might seem really essential to you, but really they're not. Your ultimate orientation needs to be about God. And when you shift that orientation towards God, then perhaps paradoxically, then you can see the ultimate good in everything you experience, and the suffering actually can go away. And this will ultimately be revealed in the times of Mashiach when that level is totally revealed, but we can get a sense of it even now. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Hope that was enlightening to you, and we will continue with this section tomorrow, and I'll speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.